Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Storyworks Roundtable. We are going to have a conversation about revision. So welcome, and God, revision, where to start? How many drafts do you normally go through before you've got a finished book? Either of you. Many.
I don't know that yet, but more than I want to admit.
How many drafts do you think you've written so far?
On my current work in progress, I'm on draft number 5.
Okay.
So, but they take a long time because I tend to rework a lot in between right now. I'm still trying to kind of figure out how my process works. So.
Right. And it does take time to figure that out. How many drafts do you go through, Robert?
My first one, I think, was somewhere between 13 and 18. There was way too many. And so when I say drafts, I'm not mean rewriting the whole thing. Obviously, we're talking about revisions. But there would have been a substantial number of words added in over that process. So I tend to write short as opposed to write long. And nowadays, I think it's 3 drafts, maybe 4 before it goes to then beta. And it varies whether I go beta first and then editor, or editor then beta, or kind of depends how I feel about what I've written. They come out cleaner sometimes. The painful first draft. It's hard not to care, but obviously get that out fast. But you're talking revision here, and so it's what I then do with that. And I will spend quite a bit of time with that first draft. I'll read it on a Kindle. I'll highlight things, make notes. I tend to do the bad thing of going through it once as a reader, but also noting everything that's wrong. So typos, grammar, and then major plot holes, and a character who somehow just disappeared halfway through the book and never returned. But I'll note all those down, and then I will prioritize them after that. So probably 3 is what I'd aim for before it can be seen by any other eyes.
Right. And then you've got a polishing draft after other people see it, I assume. Yeah, that's good. That's in line with what I recommend, or what my statement is that every story needs at least 4 drafts, because your first draft, you're just telling it to yourself. It's that down and dirty, get it out of your head and onto the page. And even if you outline, you don't necessarily know everything until you get writing. Things in that outline can shift as you get going. So draft 1 is for you. Draft 2 is for the story, and that's where you're taking what's on the page and you're making it coherent, and you're developing it, and you're finding those themes and really working it into a story. That's the crafting stage. And then draft 3 is the story that you write for your editor. So this is the other set of eyes, peer group, editor, critique group, whatever. That's where you're ready to have outside feedback. So at that point, you've got something really solid, and you've worked it so many times that you can no longer really see what's wrong with it. So you need fresh eyes for it. And then after you get that outside feedback, draft 4 is where you revise it for a reader. So that's getting it ready for publication. And 4 drafts is really the ideal. There might be 3 drafts between draft 2 and 3. I mean, it depends on the story and the writer and how much experience you have in so many other things. But I would say those are the 4 stages of getting a book ready for the world.
Yes, completely agree with that.
We have nodding, but no comments.
So as a professional editor then, how do you approach that? Because, so you might be getting, say, 2nd or 3rd or 4th from somebody. I presume you rarely get first drafts because they're just horrible to deal with anyway. You probably tell a client, look, you've got to get it into some readable shape. I'm not here to write your story for you. So assuming you're getting that third or fourth maybe, or whatever. What do you do? Do you go through and look for the big picture stuff? How do you work that for yourself? Because I think that would be valuable for us to also understand.
Right. Well, okay, I'm a developmental editor, not a copy editor, so I'm not seeing a polished draft. And if when I have a prospective client say, in the middle of December, here's my book, I want to publish it in February, and I look at my inbox and say, okay, I won't be able to get your book back to you until the middle of January, and then you're going to have to do this massive rewrite, because I can't, whatever, that's all scheduling, that's different business stuff. But when I give someone back a book, I'm not saying tweak this. I'm saying here are global issues that you need to look at, like your characterization is weak, your plot has holes in it, you have no subplots, you have plausibility issues. These are major issues of craft. So
do they come with free counseling?
Yeah, actually.
My characters are weak. My plot doesn't exist. I've got no subplot.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, coaching is included in most of my packages, and that includes hopping on Skype just to be a sounding board, and sometimes I do get to talk people off the ledge. I can't write, I don't know what to do, this character is going here in my plot, I can't figure it out. And sometimes you just need me, we're using me as an example because I know the works, I've read it, because I know you, because we've been working together, so I can be that sounding board who's not just a friend going, I'll pat your shoulder now. I'm like, oh, what about this? We can do that. Here's a suggestion, here's a method, here's craft, So yeah, that's a big part of it. But
and this is the thing, what people mistake about editing is there's this big chunk that you do, which, okay, for an experienced writer, you might write with less of those issues, but still I would get beta readers coming back to me and saying, this happened, or I'll find it, like a character I found out of my first draft who just disappeared halfway through, and it was an important character. Why did I just forget about that person? And so it was a really good discovery, because I was then able to use that to improve the story, to leave an open loop, to then close the loop later. Sorry. So I think it's easy to miss that. It's easy to get drawn into the detail of revision, when I think the first place people should start is with the big rocks. Right.
You should, definitely. And if you speaking big rocks, I want to backtrack to something you said. You said that, you do these drafts, but they aren't whole drafts because you're revising, not rewriting. And I actually think there's a stage of this process, we'll call it, draft 2 and draft 3 probably, where the most efficient way to revise is just to rewrite it. I think I learned this the hard way.
That's where I'm at right now.
My Victorian novel I'd been working on for, 7 or 8 years, and revising it, and I would cut a scene and copy and paste, and I was doing all of this manipulation of the text I had, and I would write this and fit it in, and my manuscripts would be printed out and they'd have all these X's, whole pages and notes, and then I'd have loose leaf with the handwritten new scenes and corrections inserted. So this would be page 200, and the loose leaf would be 200A, 200B, and when I got into the MFA program, this became my thesis novel, and I realized I couldn't do that. It was too painstaking and too time-consuming. So I looked at it and said, okay, in my head, after all these years of working on it, I know the structure, I know the characters, I know the arc and the story I want to tell. And I took that 7 years of work and went, bye-bye. And I wrote it fresh, and it was such a relief just to trust that all the good stuff I'd been working on was in here
Was still
somewhere.
there.
Yeah, and to write fresh and not be constrained by what was already on the page. It was really freeing. You know, and then
I haven't had to
you
do
get
that
into
yet,
that
but,
point of refining, but
yeah. I've definitely had to do that from the point of view of, say, opening chapters, which are often where the story is still struggling to find its feet. So it's easier to rewrite it. And I've done that where I've reread the first part and I thought, oh God, that's horrible. And I go into a fug for a few days, and then it suddenly came to me, hang on a minute, reread the ending. Where the story is finished strong, and then go back with that sitting in your head immediately and just rewrite the draft of the opening chapter. And that really helped. So I can see, obviously, there are times where you just can do that with the whole book if you're up for it.
Right. And I like that you said that. I think that'll be helpful for a lot of people, that if you know you've got a piece that you like and a piece that's not working, take the time to sit down and read the stuff that is strong so you get that voice and that rhythm and all that material fresh in your head. And then don't look at the crappy stuff and sit down and just start writing it again.
Yeah.
Kathryn, would you like to say something? I know there was a hand going up earlier.
Oh, no, I just said that's where I'm at. I'm at that kind of... I know what I want to say in terms of the plotline and the characterization, but a lot of what I've written is so far outside of the main story sometimes that I just have to say, okay, I'm taking this and I'm taking this and I'm tying them together by just rewriting a whole new chapter. You know, and not, you know, maybe I have some things that I know I'm going to incorporate, but not trying to verbatim pull things through, because then there are mixed voices or things really start sounding like I'm stitching them together rather than a complete story. And I don't know, like, that's just kind of been my instinct with this, is to kind of almost have it side by side, looking at it and going, okay, well, I like this, but I don't like that. And I like, okay, now close that and then write it fresh. You know, maybe take some notes about what I want, but not necessarily copy it verbatim, because that's just too much, taking too much old, and then you kind of get stuck in it, and then you don't know how to kind of fix it without just clearing the decks and going with your instinct of the character and the plot rather than the words that you've already put down.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at right now, and it's frustrating sometimes because I'll be writing this chapter going, I already did this. The character's already done this.
I know.
But it needs to happen in order to make the story tighter and the characterization better.
Definitely. And it's really useful, I think, to save those old drafts. And before Scrivener, that was all paper for me. You know, 3-ring binders exploding with manuscripts, but now I just take my chapter and duplicate it and then move it into a new folder for the next draft. So I do have the reference point of the old, but I don't have to try to manipulate the old. I can just like cut it, you know, and those little index cards are so nice. I do my storyboarding process before I write, and then I write my first draft, and as I write the first draft, I make a little index card for each chapter. So I basically have my original storyboard and then a new one that is what I actually wrote, because things do shift as you get into the story. And then when I do the next draft, I've got that revised storyboard as a reference point, so I don't have to get my head back into the text of the first draft and get mired in it. I've got this whole new, you know, outline / storyboard as a reference point, and sometimes I hardly even need to look at them. Just the act of doing it like cements it into my mind of, right, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing. But it's nice to know it's there as a tool.
Yeah, it's dependent, isn't it, on what type of editing process you enjoy. I find I'm very analytical, so I will literally, the first 3 books I wrote, I took them apart scene by scene, and then I gave each scene a rating of, you know, how interesting it was. Then I'd like to make a good book book recommendation, if that's okay. So in addition to all of Alida's work and the blog, which is obviously a fabulous resource,
well, thank you.
It's where I would start. I would also recommend, I think it's called the Book Architecture Method by Stuart Horowitz. Do you know it, Alida?
No, I haven't read that.
It goes away from the traditional, 3-act play structure that so many books, and I don't have any problem with the 3-act structure or 5-act structure. It's helpful. What I liked about the book architecture method is he uses some great examples, and he uses the ugly duckling as his main theme story for the whole thing and takes it apart. It's wonderful. It's really well written. And his idea that you're going to have a lot of, he calls them series maybe, or themes. I can't remember. It's confusing because we talk of theme as an overall thing, and he talks about it as sub things. Okay. But the idea is you've got all these separate threads going through your book, and that there are moments when you want those threads to converge, and when they all converge, so every single one of them converges, then that's what they call a key scene. And if you don't deliver as a writer on the key scene, then the story fails the reader. And so we've all read, like we were talking in a different episode about Cloud Atlas, and how it, in our opinion, could have been so much better had all those pieces been somehow cleverly drawn together. And maybe as a reader you're expecting that, and this in his book he shows how that happens. And I actually took his stuff, I did a revised beats like you did, a backfill on my outline. So what did it look like once I'd written it? Did all this color coding and blah blah blah, and color coded for which characters are in what, and I looked at this big mess, and then I used his thing to graph where all my different series were going and when they were converging. And there's one he calls the home series, which is where it's the thing that drives the timeline of the book, or the story, where the reader always knows where they're at. So it's always when Jack Reacher is changing his clothes, or there's always that moment when okay, we're at this part, and it's familiar, and now I'm grounded again in the story. It was very, very clever, and I'm surprised that not more people use it. And it helped me see loose ends, and it also helped me see where I could beneficially bring sort of 3 things that I'd had as disparate together and make a whole scene way more powerful. So that aspect of revision I quite like as well. And you can't do it unless you read it and then do the helicopter view and say, okay, well, what are my key series within this? And one of them is going to be your main character, because if you don't have one for them, then you don't have a story.
Right.
That's just
it's a little hard to. Well, there you go. There's an example of someone who did it.
Experimental though, and acknowledged to be.
Yes. Yeah, experimental and surprisingly popular. Well, we don't know about how popular it was amongst readers, but anyway, moving on from Cloud Atlas. I like one of the things you were saying in there, Robert, about how people really need to go into the story. And so often as we're writing that first draft, it's hard to identify the themes and to really work the subplots. A lot of writers I see have the material for subplots. They have the supporting characters. They have the seeds of conflict there, but then they don't develop them. They don't work them through the whole story. So
guilty, Your Honor, guilty.
So everyone on revision on that crafting draft, and then again, somewhere that third draft, whether it's really 3 or 6 or 7, look for those threads, look for those subplots, look for your themes, and make sure that they aren't dropping out of your knit. Don't drop your stitches, right? Keep picking them up and keeping them back in the cloth that you're making of your story. So, Kathryn, anything you want to add about revision?
That I haven't gotten to my favorite part yet, because my favorite part of revision is where you get to manipulate the language and make it all happy and shiny. And that hasn't happened yet. So I'm looking forward to that, because every time I've written for, whether it was for school or for, more of a shorter work or things that I've polished before, when you get down to that level where you are doing kind of everything kind of feels like it's in place, and now you get to make it pretty. Like, that's the fun part for me, is getting down to, just manipulating, I'm going to change just this word to make the whole thing pop, makes me really happy. So I'm looking forward to that.
That is fun. Yeah. Yeah. It depends on your personality. It's either fun or it's tedious, but
right.
I enjoyed a poet who I have no idea who it was. Years and years ago I saw this quote, but it was a poet, not a prose writer. He said, "I spent half the day removing a comma and the other half of the day replacing it."
Right?
It's like, yeah.
And you can get stuck in it, and you don't want to get stuck in it. There's always going to be a million changes that you can make, but it's whether or not it's worth it to your story. You got to, at some point, just say, I'm done. And it is what it is. But it is really fun to see it kind of, like you said, called polished draft. It's nice to see it become that full, complete thing.
It is, yeah. I love that part too. And I'll leave us with another quote, this one from Mark Twain. He said, "The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug." That's a great one, isn't it? I love that quote. I'm like, yep. Yep. Yes. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of the Storyworks Roundtable. You can find all our episodes at wordessential.com/Storyworks Roundtable. And come on over to the Facebook Storyworks Writers group. Let us know what you think about revision, post some questions, and join the conversation. That is totally going to be the still.